The information regulator has served the SAPS with summons after details of the Krugersdorp gang rape victims were made public. Just last month, 8 women, you might remember, who are part of a film crew, were raped while on a set of a music video at a mine dump in that area. After that incident, messages containing the victims' names, their age, their home addresses started circulating on social media. This, of course, is in violation of the Protection of Information Act, of Personal Information Act, I should say. So let's get you a sense of what else we need to think about around this issue. Bring in our guests. Alison Tilley is an attorney. She's with Judges Matter. Also joining us today is a gender-based violence researcher, Vetten. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time. It's so lovely to have you on the program. Alison, let me perhaps begin with you. If you're able to just outline for us what the law says around even the publicizing of the names of victims of high-profile cases like this Krugersdorp gang rape, because on the face of it, people might want to humanize these individuals almost from an empathetic point of view or departure. But why is that potentially problematic?
Well, I think from my perspective, looking at the Protection of Personal Information Act, which is the act that the information regulator is responsible for, you have to understand that whenever you use people's personal information, and in this instance it certainly would be personal information, you're supposed to use it carefully. And that's the bottom line of the act, is that you have to think about people's information respectfully and use it carefully. And I think what we have in this instance is extremely personal information that relates to so many different issues that the Act would regard as not just personal information, but special personal information. And what's happened here is that there appears to have been processing of that information, and it seems as though the information was then leaked. And that, of course, is a real problem in terms of the Act.
Yeah, 100%. Lisa, how often does something like this happen? You know, the details of victims of any crime, let alone gender-based violence crimes, being leaked in some way or the other, specifically from police, individuals who are meant to protect them?
It should never happen, and this is the first time I am aware of this happening, because I wouldn't be surprised if this is not also a violation of the Criminal Procedure Act, which makes an offence to publish names. And I think one could make an argument that circulating details on WhatsApp publicly could also be a form of publishing in the sense meant by the Criminal Procedure Act. So I do wonder about that. I think, from my experience of having worked with women whose names have been publicized by newspapers, for instance, they do not in any way find this to be an empathic experience at all, on a range of levels. Firstly, the point about a rape is that it profoundly violates your sense of control and what happens to you in the world and your sense of safety. When this information is leaked, it's once again something you have lost control over. As Alison has said, people now have very personal and still very stigmatizing information about you. They tend not to be empathic. They tend to be nosy, frankly, and very curious. From women I know who this has happened to, they've had people come up to them in the street and ask them, "Oh, is this you? Is this what has happened to you?" You also have people from across the country who might have known you phoning you up and saying, "Is this you? Is this you?" This is not necessary. This is not something you may be ready to speak about, especially so soon after a rape. And so it's profoundly intrusive when people have this information. You have lost control over what has happened, how these very personal details about you are now distributed in the world. People know where you live. So what it does for your fear is, of course, also very, very disturbing. Your sense of safety in the world is once again shattered, and again so soon after an experience that is profoundly shattering of a sense of safety in the world. Yeah,
you raised so many interesting and important points, Lisa. Do you reckon that we should start thinking more carefully around even the publicizing of the names of people who've died, for instance, in mass shootings? And we've seen that take place in, for instance, the mass shootings we've seen in various taverns in this country. Because, yes, while the victims are laid, they may very well have family members who aren't ready to go through some of the things you've mentioned rape victims may be going through if their names are made public.
Yes, absolutely. I think one has to think much more broadly about the ripple effects, because, you use the word empathic. Unfortunately, for most people, it's something sensational, it's something spectacular, it's a little bit of exciting gossip for them to share. but it's passing. It's something to talk about for 2 days, and then they move on with their lives. This remains permanently with somebody, and as you've also pointed out, it ripples more broadly around to family. And there are these questions of, as you said, the police are there. It's even more serious when it's the police doing it.
Yeah.
Because, on one level, they also have to create rapport with complainants who need to trust them to be able to tell them what happened. And so when the people who, in theory, are supposed to trust and protect you create this kind of violation, it's a very, very particular kind of, it makes it even more serious in some respects, that it's done by the people who are supposed to protect and do something about your crime.
Absolutely. And I guess that raises questions around accountability, Alison. I mean, the information regulator has only just recently put together, I think it's called an enforcement committee, to try hold to account people who are found to be in breach of the POPIA, as it were. But, I mean, it becomes difficult to hold anybody accountable, any individual accountable, when it's police broadly that are accused of mishandling information like this.
Well, I think that's why a systemic inquiry is really we think, a useful approach. It's not necessarily about finding that one individual, because, it may be impossible to do that. But what you can and we can do is look at systems and see whether the systems are in place to properly protect the personal information of, and in this instance, rape survivors, but it also other victims of crime. And really make sure that those systems are in place in order to ensure that this kind of a violation of survivors' rights doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And I wonder what those systems might look like. And I appreciate it's a very broad question, that, especially because this information, let's be frank, needs to pass through multiple people's hands if justice is going to be served. I'm thinking now of the court system, for instance, just how many people might be involved in getting access to this kind of information. So if there's going to be any kind of meaningful accountability system, where does one begin?
Well, the way you begin is really asking how personal information is processed. So you want to know how it's collected, how it's stored, how it's processed when it's being used. And you want to know that it's disposed of when it's no longer needed. And these are things that big organizations have to do all the time. So banks and insurance companies, they are exactly in this position of processing, again, very personal information, and they do it on a regular basis. And they also can end up in trouble with a data breach, but usually in that situation, it will involve many thousands of names, or even more than that. So this is quite a small group of names. It's one particular instance. But yes, that really is how we have to approach it and look at the personal information as a whole in the system, and whether it's being appropriately secured.
Yeah. The information regulator, Lisa, saying this is a serious indictment if police, in fact, are found to be behind what's taken place. The reality, though, sadly, is that the information is out there. When we talk about a victim-centered response to try to remedy something like this, what do you reckon that looks like?
Well, I think one of the things that we can do is make sure it doesn't happen again. And we can also make sure that when people are in this position, that they're aware, and some of this is education and awareness, that it's not just interesting or satisfying your curiosity to share the WhatsApp with a friend of yours or a neighbor, that it actually is a violation of legislation, and that you are not supposed to do it. You should not do it, and if you have done it, you should delete the message, because that information should not be being bandied around in public.
Yeah. Lisa, same question to you.
I think this particular case does raise very profound questions about privacy, especially in a social media age. And as Alison has said, yes, it's very exciting. It's a 3-day wonder to be able to share this kind of information, but never forget, for you, it's information. For somebody else, it's their life. And I think that we have to keep reminding people of that this is not information. It is people's lives. So before you send this on, before you look at it, before it's something that causes you to get, your 9-day wonder, think about the impact on others. And keep that foremost and think about that before you hit send and pass it on further. Just think about the impact this has on someone's life. It's lifelong. This will follow them, because then once something is on social media, the problem is that even if I move towns and go somewhere else, people ever Google me, this information may come up in one form or another. So just think about the long-term ramifications, the way in which information spreads, privacy, and don't do it.
Lisa Vetten, thanks very much indeed for helping us unpack these issues. Lisa joined there also by Alison Tilley, who's an attorney. Lisa is a gender-based violence researcher. To both our guests, we appreciate your time on the AM Report today. Thanks very much indeed.